The human ship Aurora moved slowly through space toward the crystal planet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the world grow larger on the screen. Everything about the planet looked perfect. The cities gleamed like jewels. The oceans were the exact right shade of blue. Even the clouds formed perfect patterns in the sky. Jake rubbed his jaw where an old scar made his face look uneven. He had gotten that scar as a kid when he fell from a tree. His mom always said it gave him character. Looking at the perfect world ahead, he wondered what the aliens would think of his crooked face. "Captain, we are getting a message from the planet," said Lieutenant Amy Chen from her station. She was the best scientist on the ship and would stay behind to learn about alien technology. "Put it on screen," Jake said. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go quiet. A woman stood in what looked like a room made of pure light, but she was not human. Her skin changed color from silver to blue like water. Her face was so perfect it almost hurt to look at. Every part of her was exactly the right size and shape. Her hair moved like it was underwater even though there was no wind. "Greetings, humans of Earth," she said. Her voice sounded like music. "I am Princess Lyralai Zeph Prima of the Zephyrian Empire. We welcome you to our world." Jake stepped forward. "Thank you, Princess. I am Captain Jake Morrison. We are honored to meet you." The princess smiled, but it looked like she had practiced it 1,000 times. "Your ship may land at Convergence Point 7. Coordinates are being sent to your navigation system now." The screen went dark. Jake's crew looked at each other with wide eyes. "Did you see her?" whispered Tom Rodriguez, the pilot. "She was like a living statue. More like a work of art," said Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's doctor. Jake nodded but said nothing. Something about the princess bothered him, though he could not say what. 2 hours later, Jake and his team walked through the alien city. Everything was made of crystal that sang softly in the wind. The buildings reached toward the sky in perfect curves. The streets were clean and smooth. Even the plants grew in exact patterns. The aliens they saw were all beautiful like the princess. Each one moved with perfect grace. They wore clothes that seemed to be made of light itself. When they spoke to each other, their voices blended together like a choir. "This place is amazing," Amy said as she looked around with wonder. "It is beautiful," agreed Dr. Park. "But does something feel strange to you?" Jake knew what she meant. The city was too perfect. There were no broken windows, no trash, no signs of normal life. It was like walking through a picture instead of a real place. They reached a huge building that looked like it was made from a single giant crystal. Princess Lyralai waited for them at the entrance. Up close, she was even more perfect than on the screen. Her skin had tiny patterns that shifted and changed. Her eyes were purple like precious stones. "Welcome to the Grand Convergence Chamber," she said with that same practiced smile. "Please follow me." Inside, the walls showed moving pictures of space and stars. The princess led them to a room where other aliens waited. Each one was perfect in their own way. They all moved and spoke like they had been programmed. "We have prepared this meeting to discuss an exchange of knowledge," Princess Lyralai said. She stood very straight and her hands were folded just right. "The Zephyrian Empire wishes to learn about human culture. In return, we will share our biotechnology with your people." An alien with golden skin stepped forward. "I am High Counselor Vex Prima. We propose that Princess Lyralai visit your ship to study your ways. Your scientist, Dr. Chen, may remain here to learn our methods." Amy looked excited. "I would be honored to stay and learn." Jake studied the princess. As the others talked about the exchange, he watched her face. For just a moment, when she thought no one was looking, her perfect smile slipped. He saw something in her purple eyes that did not match her flawless appearance. It looked almost like sadness, or maybe longing for something she could not name. "Princess," Jake said suddenly, "what do you hope to learn about humans?" The question seemed to surprise her. She blinked, and for a second her practiced manner disappeared. I am curious about your imperfections," she said slowly. "Your people make mistakes, yet you continue to exist. This does not match our understanding of survival." The other aliens looked uncomfortable when she said this. High Counselor Vex Prima quickly stepped in. "What the princess means is that we wish to study your adaptive methods." But Jake had heard what she really said. She was curious about imperfections. In a world where everything was perfect, that was a strange thing to wonder about. "We would be happy to have you visit our ship," Jake said directly to the princess. "You might find humans more interesting than you expect." For the first time, her smile looked real. "I believe I might," she said softly. The meeting continued for another hour as they planned the details. Amy would stay in the Crystal City to learn about Zephyrian science. Princess Lirelai would come to the Aurora to observe human behavior. They would meet again in 1 month to share what they had learned. As they prepared to leave, Jake caught the princess looking at his scarred face with curious eyes. When she noticed him watching, she quickly looked away and returned to her perfect posture. Walking back to their ship, Dr. Park asked, "What do you think of her?" Jake thought about the sadness he had seen in those purple eyes. "I think she is more than she appears to be," he said. He did not know how right he was. Princess Lirelai stood in the doorway of her new room on the human ship and stared in confusion. The space was small and cramped compared to her crystal palace. Worse, it was messy. The bed was not made perfectly. Clothes hung from hooks on the wall instead of being stored in proper order. There were pictures stuck to the walls showing people laughing and making silly faces. "This is where I'm supposed to sleep?" she asked Jake, who was showing her around the ship. Jake looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Princess. This is the best guest room we have. I know it is not what you are used to." Lirelai walked slowly around the room, touching things with careful fingers. She picked up a small toy spaceship from the desk. It was painted badly and had scratches on it. "Why do you keep broken things?" she asked. "That belonged to Ensign Martinez when he was a kid," Jake explained. "He brought it with him when he joined the crew. It reminds him of home, but it serves no function. It takes up space that could be used for something useful." Jake sat down on the edge of the bed, making it even more wrinkled. "Maybe it does serve a function, just not one you can measure." Lirelai did not understand, but she carefully put the toy back where she found it. Over the next few days, Jake showed her around the ship. Everything confused her more. The cafeteria was loud and chaotic. People sat wherever they wanted instead of in assigned spots. They talked and laughed while they ate. Some spilled food on their clothes and just wiped it off without caring. "Do your people have no discipline?" Lirelai asked as they watched a group of engineers argue loudly about the best way to fix a broken pipe. "They are not arguing," Jake said with a smile. "They are discussing. Each person has a different idea, and they are trying to find the best solution. But there must be one correct answer." "Why do they not simply calculate it?" "Because sometimes the best answer is not the one you calculate. Sometimes it is the one you discover by talking it through." Lirelai watched the engineers for a long time. Finally, they agreed on a solution that combined parts of all their ideas. When they finished fixing the pipe, they all looked happy, even the ones whose ideas were not chosen. In her own world, the High Council would have simply told them the correct answer. There would be no discussion, no argument, no wasted time. But watching the humans work together, she began to wonder if something was lost in all that efficiency. Jake became her guide to human behavior. He was assigned to help her understand their customs and culture. At first, she found him frustrating. He did not stand straight like a proper leader. He ran his hands through his hair when he was thinking, making it messy. He interrupted her when she was speaking, which was considered very rude on her world. But slowly, she began to see that these imperfections were not flaws to be corrected. They were part of who he was. One day, she tried to help by reorganizing the ship's duty schedule. She created a perfect system where every person had the exact right job at the exact right time. No energy would be wasted. Everyone would work at peak efficiency. When she showed it to Jake, he looked at it for a long time. "This is very impressive," he said finally, "but I do not think it will work." "Why not?" "I have calculated the optimal use of every person's skills." "You have forgotten something important. People are not machines. They get tired. They have bad days. They need time to talk to their friends and think about their families. Your schedule is perfect, but it does not leave room for people to be human." Lirelai felt something strange when he said this. Her chest felt tight and her face grew warm. On her world, schedules were always followed exactly. The idea that someone might need something different from what was calculated seemed impossible. "Show me," she said quietly. Jake spent the next hour explaining how the crew really worked. He showed her how the engineers liked to work together in the morning when they were fresh. He explained that Dr. Park needed quiet time in the afternoon to review her medical files. He pointed out that the night shift crew were friends who enjoyed each other's company and worked better together. "Your schedule would separate all these natural partnerships," Jake said. "It would be more efficient on paper, but the crew would be less happy. and unhappy people do not do their best work. As he talked, Lorelei began to see patterns she had never noticed before. The messy, chaotic way humans organized themselves was actually a complex system. It was not based on pure logic, but on understanding what people needed to be their best selves. I did not consider their emotional needs, she said slowly. Because you were not taught to, Jake replied. But that does not mean you cannot learn. That night, Lorelei lay in her messy human bed and thought about what Jake had said. Her creators had given her the ability to learn and adapt, but only within certain limits. They had never expected her to question the basic rules of efficiency and perfection. The next day, she asked Jake to teach her more about human emotion. They sat in the ship's observation lounge looking out at the stars. How do you make decisions when logic gives you several equally good choices? She asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. I guess I go with what feels right. Feels right? Yeah. Like sometimes you just know something is the right thing to do even if you cannot explain why. Lorelei tried to understand this concept. On her world, every decision was made by calculating all possible outcomes and choosing the mathematically best option. The idea of using feeling instead of logic seemed dangerous and wrong. But as she watched Jake talk about the things that mattered to him, she began to notice something. When he spoke about his crew or his home planet, his whole face changed. His eyes got brighter and his voice became warmer. He was showing emotion and it made him more alive, not less logical. I think I'm beginning to understand, she said. Jake turned to look at her. You know what I like about you, Princess? What? You think about things in a completely different way than I do. Your analysis of our duty schedule was beautifully flawed. Flawed? The word hit her like a physical blow. On her world, being called flawed was the worst insult possible. But the way Jake said it, with warmth in his voice and admiration in his eyes, made it sound like something good. Something strange happened to her body. Her heart began beating faster. Her breathing became shallow. Heat spread through her chest and up her neck. A small sound escaped her lips before she could stop it. Are you all right? Jake asked, looking concerned. Lorelei touched her throat in confusion. She had never made a sound like that before. Her body had never reacted this way to anything. According to her programming, being called flawed should have triggered shame and a desire to correct the imperfection. Instead, she felt something warm and exciting that she had no name for. I am fine, she said quickly, but her voice sounded different even to her own ears. Jake looked at her with curious eyes, the same way he had looked at her in the Crystal Palace. Princess, can I ask you something? Yes. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to choose your own path instead of following the one chosen for you? The question made her chest tight again. On her world, questioning your assigned role was unthinkable. But sitting here with Jake, looking out at the infinite stars, she found herself wondering for the first time what she might choose if she could choose anything at all. I have never considered it, she lied. But that night, alone in her messy human room, she found herself thinking about nothing else. 3 weeks had passed since Princess Lorelei came to the human ship. Each day brought new confusions and strange feelings she could not explain. She found herself watching Jake when he thought she was not looking. The way he moved fascinated her. Unlike her people who glided with perfect grace, Jake walked with purpose but not perfection. Sometimes he stumbled slightly or had to catch himself when the ship moved unexpectedly. On her world, such clumsiness would be corrected immediately. But watching Jake, she began to think these small imperfections made him more real, more alive somehow. She also noticed other things about him. The scar on his jaw that made his smile crooked. The way his hair never stayed perfectly in place no matter how many times he pushed it back. The small lines around his eyes from squinting at stars and smiling too much. Each flaw told a story about his life, and she found herself wanting to know all those stories. One morning, a message came from Dr. Amy Chen, who was still studying on the Crystal Planet. Jake called Lorelei to the communication room to translate some of the technical terms Amy had trouble understanding. Amy's face appeared on the screen, but she looked worried instead of excited. Jake, I need to tell you something important about what I have learned here. What is it? Jake asked. Amy glanced around nervously before speaking quietly. The Zephyrians are not what they seem. Their perfection comes with a terrible cost. Lorelei felt her body grow cold. What do you mean? Princess, I do not mean to offend you, but your people have given up everything that makes life worth living. They have eliminated all choice, all creativity, all individual thought. Everyone follows predetermined paths from birth to death. That ensures order and efficiency, Lyrelei said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. But at what cost? Amy continued. I have been here for weeks and I have never seen anyone laugh spontaneously or cry or get angry or fall in love. Your people are beautiful, but they are not truly alive. After the call ended, Lyrelei sat in silence for a long time. Jake waited patiently beside her. Is she right? Lyrelei finally asked. What do you think? Jake replied gently. Lyrelei thought about her life before coming to the human ship. Every day had been planned perfectly. She woke at the exact right time, ate the exact right foods, and performed her duties with flawless precision. She had never questioned whether she was happy because happiness was not part of her programming. But now, after experiencing the chaotic warmth of human life, the idea of returning to that cold perfection made her feel sick. I think she might be, Lyrelei whispered. That night, Lyrelei did something she had never done before. She rearranged her room. Instead of keeping everything in perfect order, she moved things around just because she wanted to. She put the little toy spaceship on her pillow. She hung one of Jake's old shirts that he had given her on the wall next to the pictures. She left her bed unmade and scattered her things around like she had seen the humans do. When she looked at the messy room, she felt something new, pride. Not the cold satisfaction of perfect completion, but warm pride in making choices for herself. The next day, she asked Jake to teach her a human game. He chose something called poker, which involved cards and trying to guess what other players were thinking. The key is not just to play your cards well, Jake explained as they sat with several crew members around a table. You also have to read the other players. Watch their faces, their hands, the way they breathe. Everyone has tells when they are lying. Lyrelei found the game impossibly complex. There were no clear rules for optimal play. Success depended on understanding human psychology, which was messy and unpredictable. She lost every hand for the first hour. I am terrible at this, she said after losing again. You are learning, Jake said with encouragement. Stop trying to calculate the perfect move and start watching the people. Slowly, Lyrelei began to understand. When Ensign Martinez touched his nose, he was bluffing. When Dr. Park smiled too widely, she had a good hand. When Jake drummed his fingers on the table, he was thinking hard about whether to fold or bet. She won her first hand when she realized Jake was trying to let her win. Instead of being grateful, she felt insulted. Do not do that, she said firmly. Do what? Pretend I am better than I am. If I lose, tell me I lost. If I make a mistake, tell me what I did wrong. Jake looked surprised. Most people do not like criticism. I am not most people. On my world, I was praised for everything because I was designed to be perfect. But that praise meant nothing because it was not earned. I want to know when I truly succeed and when I fail. The other players exchanged glances. This was not how they expected an alien princess to behave. All right, Jake said slowly. You are holding your cards too tightly when you have a good hand. It gives you away. Lyrelei looked down at her hands and saw he was right. She had been unconsciously gripping the cards harder when she was excited about her hand. What else? She asked. You calculate too much. This game is not about math. It is about psychology. Stop thinking about probability and start thinking about what the other players want you to believe. For the rest of the evening, Jake pointed out her mistakes honestly. Each criticism made her feel that same strange warmth she had experienced when he first called her flawed. Her heart raced, her breathing became shallow, and she had to fight to keep from making small sounds of pleasure. She was beginning to understand that these physical reactions happened when Jake treated her like a real person instead of a perfect creation. When he criticized her, challenged her, or expected her to be better, it meant he saw her as someone capable of growth and change. Late that night, alone in her messy room, Lyrelei realized something that terrified her. She did not want to go back to her perfect world. She wanted to stay here with these flawed, wonderful humans who made her feel alive. But her choice was not her own to make. The next morning, alarms rang throughout the ship. Jake ran to the bridge with Lyrelei close behind him. On the main screen, 3 large Zephyrian vessels hung in space near the Aurora. Captain Morrison, came a familiar voice. High Counselor Vex Prima appeared on the screen, his golden face stern with disapproval. We have come to retrieve Princess Lyrelei. Her vital signs indicate she has been contaminated by human influence. Contaminated? Jake asked angrily. The princess is experiencing unauthorized emotional responses, another Zephyrian said. Her heart rate has been irregular. Her neural patterns show signs of chaotic thought processes. She must return immediately for recalibration. Lyrelei felt like ice water had been poured into her veins. Recalibration meant they would erase everything she had learned, everything she had felt, everything she had become. They would make her perfect again. What if she does not want to go? Jake asked, stepping protectively in front of her. The Zephyrians looked genuinely confused by the question. Want is irrelevant, Vex Prima said. She has a function to perform. Personal desires only interfere with optimal performance. Princess, he continued, addressing her directly. Prepare for transport. We will repair the damage these humans have done to your programming. Lyrelei looked at Jake's scarred, imperfect, beautiful face. She thought about the warmth she felt when he called her flawed. She remembered the pride of choosing how to arrange her own room. She thought about the joy of learning poker, even though she was bad at it. Then she thought about returning to her crystal palace, where every moment was predetermined and every response was programmed. No, she said quietly. The word hung in the air like a dropped bomb. What did you say? Vex Prima asked, his perfect composure slipping slightly. I said no. Lyrelei's voice grew stronger. I do not want to be recalibrated. I do not want to return to perfection. I want to stay here and continue learning about choice. Jake smiled at her, and she felt that wonderful warm sensation flood through her body again. Princess, Vex Prima said coldly, you do not have a choice in this matter. You belong to the Zephyrian Empire. You will return, willingly or not. The Zephyrian ships began moving closer to the Aurora, their weapons powering up. Jake looked at his crew, then at Lyrelei. Looks like we have a fight on our hands, he said. For the first time in her life, Lyrelei felt truly free to choose her own path, even if that path led to danger. The Aurora hung in space between the three Zephyrian warships like a tiny bird surrounded by eagles. Jake stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the captain's chair as he stared at the alien vessels on the main screen. They are much bigger than us, Lieutenant Rodriguez said nervously from the pilot's seat. Size is not everything, Jake replied. But Lyrelei could hear the worry in his voice. The communication system crackled to life again. This time a different Zephyrian appeared on the screen. This one wore robes of deep purple and gold, marking him as someone of the highest rank. I am Admiral Kex Primus of the Zephyrian High Fleet, he said. His voice was cold and commanding. Captain Morrison, you are interfering with Imperial property. Return the princess immediately or we will take her by force. Jake stepped forward, his jaw set in determination. Princess Lyrelei is not property. She is a person with the right to choose her own path. Admiral Kex Primus laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Humans and their primitive ideas about individual rights. You do not understand what you are protecting. Then explain it to us, Jake said. The Admiral's expression grew serious. Very well. Since you will be dead soon anyway, there is no harm in telling you the truth. He gestured, and Lyrelei's image appeared beside him on the screen. But this was not how she looked now. This was her original form, perfect and flawless in every detail. Princess Lyrelei is not merely a member of our royal family, the Admiral continued. She is the prototype for our species' next evolutionary step. Every cell in her body has been engineered to be the perfect leader for galactic expansion. Lyrelei felt her blood turn cold. What do you mean? You were created to be irresistible to other species, Admiral Kex Primus explained. Your beauty, your intelligence, your very presence is designed to make other races want to follow you. Once we perfect the process, we will create thousands like you to lead our conquest of the galaxy. Jake turned to look at Lyrelei, shock and understanding in his eyes. They made you to be a weapon. The perfect weapon, the Admiral agreed. One that conquers through attraction rather than force. But your contamination by human influence has ruined years of careful programming. That is why you must be recalibrated. Lyrelei stared at the image of her perfect self on the screen. Everything she had believed about her life was a lie. She was not a princess learning about other cultures. She was a prototype being tested before mass production. You feel betrayed, Admiral Kex Primus observed, watching her face. That is another human contamination. In your original state, you would accept this revelation with logical understanding. Your current emotional response proves how damaged you have become. Damaged? Jake said angrily. She has become more human, more real, more herself. She has no self, the Admiral replied coldly. She is a tool created for a purpose. Tools do not have selves. Lyrelai felt something break inside her chest. All her life, she had believed she was special, important, valued. But she was just a weapon in an elegant shell. Jake moved to stand beside her. That is not true, he said quietly. You are not what they made you to be. You are what you choose to become. How can you say that? Lyrelai whispered. Everything about me is artificial. My beauty, my intelligence, even my curiosity about your people. It was all programmed. Was it programmed for you to rearrange your room? Jake asked. Was it programmed for you to ask me to criticize you instead of praise you? Was it programmed for you to refuse to go back? Lyrelai thought about this. Her original programming would never have included the desire to be criticized or to make choices that served no logical purpose. Those things came from you, Jake continued. The real you. The part of you that grew beyond what they created. Admiral Kex Primus watched this exchange with growing impatience. Enough philosophy. Princess, you have 30 seconds to transport to our ship willingly, or we will destroy this vessel and take you from the wreckage. The Zephyrian ships powered their weapons to full charge. Energy began building around their hulls like liquid light. Princess, Jake said urgently, you have to choose. Not because I am telling you to, but because it is your choice to make. Lyrelai looked around the bridge at the human crew. These people were preparing to die for her right to choose her own path. They barely knew her, yet they were willing to fight an entire alien fleet to protect her freedom. She thought about her crystal palace, where every moment would be predetermined for the rest of her existence. She thought about being turned into a weapon to conquer innocent worlds. She thought about never again feeling the warm rush of being called beautifully flawed. I choose to stay, she said firmly. 20 seconds, Admiral Kex Primus announced. Jake turned to his crew. All hands prepare for battle. We might be smaller, but we are fighting for something they do not understand. 10 seconds. Lyrelai felt strange. Her skin began to tingle and her vision grew blurry. Something was wrong with her body. 5 seconds. Wait, she gasped, grabbing Jake's arm. Something is happening to me. Her perfect silver blue skin began to flicker. The smooth perfection of her features started to shift and change. She could feel her body rejecting something deep inside her cells. What is this? Admiral Kex Primus demanded, staring at her image on the screen. Lyrelai collapsed to her knees as pain shot through her entire body. But it was not just pain. It felt like chains breaking, like walls crumbling, like being born for the second time. Her bioengineering is failing, High Counselor Vex Prima said, appearing beside the Admiral on the screen. The emotional stress of choosing against her programming is causing her modified genetics to collapse. Impossible, the Admiral snarled. She was designed to be stable under all conditions. We did not account for the possibility that she would choose to reject her own perfection, Vex Prima admitted. Jake knelt beside Lyrelai as her body continued to change. Her skin lost its flawless shimmer and settled into a more natural tone. Her hair became less perfect with tiny flaws and irregularities. Her features remained beautiful, but in a more human way. Are you all right? Jake asked, helping her stand. Lyrelai looked at her hands. They no longer looked like they were carved from living art. They looked like real hands that belonged to a real person. I think I am becoming myself, she said. Wonderingly, Admiral Kex Primus stared at her, transformed, appearance with disgust. Look what you have done to yourself. You have thrown away perfection for this crude imitation of humanity. This is not an imitation, Lyrelai said, standing tall despite her weakness. This is who I choose to be. A failed prototype is useless to us, the Admiral said coldly. Keep her. She is no longer Zephyrian property. But Admiral, Vex Prima protested, she still has knowledge of our technology. Our plans. Knowledge held by a defective mind is worthless, the Admiral replied. Let the humans have their broken princess. We will create new prototypes, better ones that cannot be corrupted by contact with inferior species. The Zephyrian ships began to move away from the Aurora. This is not over. Humans, Admiral Kex Primus said as his image began to fade. The galaxy will be ours, with or without this failed experiment. The screen went dark, and the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. Jake helped Lyrelai to a chair as Dr. Park rushed onto the bridge to examine her. How do you feel? the doctor asked, scanning her with a medical device. Lyrelei considered the question carefully. Her body felt different, less perfect, but more real. Her mind felt clearer, as if a fog had been lifted. Most importantly, her heart felt full of possibilities she had never imagined before. "I feel free," she said, looking into Jake's eyes. "For the first time in my life, I feel truly free." Jake smiled his crooked smile, and she felt that wonderful warm sensation flow through her transformed body. She was no longer perfect, but she was finally herself. 6 months had passed since Lyrelei chose to stay with the humans. The Aurora had been replaced by a larger exploration ship called the Horizon, designed for long journeys into unknown space. Lyrelei stood in the ship's science lab, working alongside Dr. Amy Chen, who had returned from the Crystal Planet with valuable knowledge about Zephyrian technology. "The quantum resonance is still unstable," Amy said, pointing at the readings on her screen. "We need a different approach." Lyrelei studied the data, her mind working in ways that surprised even her. 6 months ago, she would have calculated the single correct solution. Now she found herself thinking about multiple possibilities, creative alternatives that combined Zephyrian precision with human innovation. What if we intentionally create small imperfections in the crystal matrix, she suggested. Controlled chaos might make the system more adaptable. Amy raised her eyebrows. "That goes against everything your people taught us about perfect crystal formation." "My people were wrong about many things," Lyrelei said with a small smile. "Perfect systems cannot adapt to unexpected problems. Imperfect systems can. They work together to modify the crystal, introducing tiny flaws that would allow it to flex and change as needed. When they tested it, the result was more stable than any perfect crystal they had tried before." "Beautifully flawed," Amy said admiringly. Lyrelei laughed. That phrase had become something of a joke between her and the crew. Whenever someone solved a problem in an unconventional way, they called it beautifully flawed. Her appearance had settled into something entirely unique. She no longer looked like a perfect Zephyrian princess, but she did not look quite human either. Her skin had a subtle luminescence that caught the light in interesting ways. Her hair moved with a grace that was not quite natural, but not artificial either. Her eyes remained the same startling purple, but now they showed real emotion instead of programmed responses. Jake found her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with genetic engineering. When he looked at her, he saw someone who had fought to become herself, and that struggle had made her radiant. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on friendship and mutual respect. Unlike her original programming, which was designed to make others attracted to her, what she felt for Jake was real and earned. When he criticized her work, she felt that familiar warm rush of being treated as an equal. When he praised her successes, the pride was genuine because she knew he meant it. They were discussing plans for their next mission when an urgent message came through the ship's communication system. "Captain Morrison to the bridge," Lieutenant Rodriguez announced. "We have received a distress signal." Jake and Lyrelei hurried to the bridge where the crew was gathered around the main screen. Static filled the display, but they could make out pieces of a message. "Colony ship, perfection, systems failing. Request immediate assistance." "Where is the signal coming from?" Jake asked. "The Kepler sector," Rodriguez replied. "About 3 days away at maximum speed." Lyrelei felt her blood grow cold. The Perfection is a Zephyrian colony ship. They were supposed to establish a new perfect world on Kepler Prime. "Should we respond?" Dr. Park asked. "After what happened with their fleet?" Jake looked at Lyrelei. "What do you think?" 6 months ago, she would have given him the logical answer based on risk assessment and strategic advantage. Now she thought about what felt right. "People are in danger," she said simply. "We should help them." 3 days later, the Horizon arrived at Kepler Prime to find chaos. The colony ship Perfection hung dead in space, its perfect systems completely shut down. On the planet below, Zephyrian colonists wandered aimlessly through their crystal city, unable to function without their central computer to tell them what to do. "What happened here?" Jake asked as they studied the scene. Lyrelei recognized the problem immediately. They encountered something their perfect systems could not handle, and instead of adapting, everything just stopped working. The away team transported down to the planet's surface. The crystal city was beautiful but eerily quiet. Zephyrians sat in perfect groups waiting for instructions that would never come. A young Zephyrian approached them. Unlike the others, she was moving around trying different things. "Are you here to help us?" the young alien asked. Her skin was pale gold and her movements had an awkward energy that reminded Lyreley of human teenagers. "Yes," Lyreley said gently. "What is your name?" "I am Nira II. I was the backup systems manager on the ship." She looked ashamed. "I think I broke everything." "How?" "There was a problem with the atmospheric processors. The main computer calculated 17 different solutions, but they were all equally optimal. It could not choose between them, so it stopped functioning entirely. I tried to manually select one solution, but that created a cascade failure throughout all systems." Jake and Lyreley exchanged glances. This was exactly what Lyreley had predicted. Perfect systems could not handle situations where there was no single correct answer. "You did not break anything," Lyreley told Nira. "You tried to solve a problem your systems were not designed to handle." Over the following days, Lyreley worked with the colonists to rebuild their society in a new way. Instead of relying on one perfect central computer, she helped them create multiple smaller systems that could work independently and adapt to problems. More importantly, she taught them about choice. "But how do we know which choice is correct?" asked an elderly Zephyrian named Vel first. "You try it and see what happens," Lyreley explained. "If it works, you keep doing it. If it does not work, you try something else." "That seems inefficient," Vel first said doubtfully. "It is," Lyreley agreed. "But it is also flexible. When perfect efficiency fails, flexibility saves lives." She showed them how to organize work groups based on friendship and complementary skills rather than pure efficiency ratings. She taught them games like poker that required reading emotions and making decisions without perfect information. Most importantly, she showed them how to argue and discuss ideas without feeling like they had failed. Young Nira was her most eager student. The girl had always felt like something was wrong with her because she asked too many questions and wanted to try different approaches to problems. "On our old world, they would have recalibrated me by now," Nira confided to Lyreley one evening as they worked on repairing the atmospheric processors. "There is nothing wrong with you," Lyreley said firmly. "Curiosity and creativity are gifts, not flaws. But they make everything so complicated." "The best things in life are complicated," Lyreley replied, thinking of Jake and the journey that had brought her to this moment. Simple solutions work for simple problems. Complex problems require complex thinking. By the end of their stay, the Zephyrian colony was functioning better than it ever had before. They had learned to embrace controlled chaos, to value different perspectives, and to see their imperfections as strengths rather than weaknesses. As the horizon prepared to leave, Nira approached Lyreley one last time. "Will you stay and teach us more?" she asked hopefully. Lyreley looked back at the thriving colony, then at Jake, who was waiting for her at the transport platform. "I have taught you the most important lesson," she said. "Now you must learn the rest for yourselves. That is how growth works." Back on the ship, Jake found Lyreley in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. "Any regrets?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Lyreley thought about her crystal palace where everything had been perfect and nothing had been real. She thought about the terrified colonists who had nearly died because they could not adapt to the unexpected. She thought about young Nira, learning to value her own curiosity. "No regrets," she said. "I was created to be the perfect leader for galactic conquest. Instead, I became something better." "What is that?" "A bridge," she said softly. "Between perfection and possibility. Between order and chaos. Between what we are designed to be and what we choose to become." Jake took her hand in his scarred, imperfect fingers. "I love your flaws," he said with a smile. Lyreley felt that familiar warm rush through her body, the sensation that had started her journey toward becoming herself. She leaned against Jake's shoulder and looked out at the infinite stars, each one slightly different from the others, each one beautiful in its own imperfect way. "I love yours too," she whispered back. Outside the window, the universe stretched endlessly in all directions, vast and chaotic and full of wonderful possibilities. It was not perfect, but it was alive, and that made it beautiful beyond anything any genetic engineer could ever create. For the first time in her existence, Lyrelei was exactly where she belonged,